Thinking about joining the millions of Indians hitting the roads in a used car. Awesome. And you're smart to be looking at financing options. Well, you're in the right spot. We're going to take a deep dive into used car loans in India. We've got this really detailed document from a top financial institution packed with insights to help you make a smart, informed decision.
Yeah, it's amazing how much the used car market has exploded recently.
Right.
It's become like a huge force in the Indian car scene.
Yeah.
And financing is a big part of that.
Totally agree. This document shows just how accessible used car loans are these days.
Yeah.
It says banks and these financial institutions are willing to finance a big chunk of the car's value, sometimes even up to 100%.
Really?
Yeah, that's a game changer for a lot of folks who maybe don't have a ton of cash up front.
Yeah, for sure. It opens up so many possibilities.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets interesting. How much you can borrow is linked to the age of the car. Like older cars, they often come with shorter loan terms, which makes sense if you think about it from the lender's point of view.
It's all about managing risk, I guess. Like the lender wants to make sure they're not giving a loan on a car that's about to fall apart.
Right.
And speaking of risk, let's talk about something that can make or break your loan application interest rates. This document mentions they can be anywhere from 10% to 18% a year, which is a pretty big jump compared to new car loans.
Yeah, that jump is all about how lenders look at risk. With used cars, there's more uncertainty, Like what's the car's history? What kind of maintenance might it need? What's the resale value going to be? They try to make up for that uncertainty by charging higher interest.
So it's like a trade-off, right? You get the affordability of a used car, but you might pay a little more in interest. Now, I'm curious about these different types of interest rates they mention here. It talks about fixed and floating rates. What's the difference, and which one should borrowers go for?
That's a great question. Fixed interest rates, like the name says, they stay the same throughout the whole loan, so you know exactly what you're going to pay. On the other hand, floating interest rates go up and down based on what's happening in the market, which could be good if rates go down,
Right.
but risky if they go up.
So it's kind of a gamble then. Picking between fixed and floating depends on how much risk you're comfortable with and what you think is going to happen with interest rates in the future.
Exactly. It's a decision that really needs you to think it through and understand your own finances.
Okay, now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the down payment. The document says it's usually between 10% and 20% of the car's price. But then it also mentions you might be able to get 100% financing. Now that sounds pretty tempting, but I'm guessing there are some catches.
Oh, you're definitely right. While 100% financing might seem like a dream come true, it can mean you end up with higher interest rates or extra fees hidden in all that fine print. Lenders might also want you to pay for stuff like registration and insurance right away, up front.
So you really got to weigh the pros and cons carefully and not just get blinded by that zero down payment. Transparency is key. And that brings us to all the documents you need for a used car loan. What should borrowers have ready when they apply?
Well, this document gives a whole checklist. It's all pretty standard stuff. Proof of who you are, where you live, and proof of income, so they know you can pay back the loan. Then you'll need all the car documents. Registration, insurance papers, pollution certificate, all that.
Sounds like a lot of paperwork. But I guess it's all part of the process, right? And once you've got all this stuff together, what happens next?
After you turn in your application, the lender's going to check out how creditworthy you are, looking at stuff like your credit score, if your income is steady, and if you already have any other loans or debts.
Ah, the good old credit score. It pops up everywhere in the world of finance. This document really stresses how important it is if you want a good loan.
It's true. Your credit scores is like a report card for your financial health.
Right.
A good score shows you're responsible with money, and that makes you a better borrower. It can get you lower interest rates and better loan terms. So keeping your credit score healthy is super important.
So it's like a golden ticket to an easier loan process and maybe saving a lot of money in the long run.
Totally. It's worth putting in the effort.
Now, before we get too excited about hitting the road, let's not forget about those processing fees. What should borrowers expect?
Most lenders will charge a processing fee, which can be anywhere from 0.5% to 2% of the total loan amount. It's basically to cover the cost of them checking out your application and approving it.
Right, so that's another expense to work into your budget. Now, what if things are going really well financially and you want to pay off your loan ahead of schedule? Is that something you can do with used car loans?
A lot of lenders will let you prepay or even completely pay off the loan early, which gives you that flexibility to get out of debt sooner. But, super important, read the fine print. Some lenders might hit you with penalties for paying early.
So it's a bit of a balancing act then. You could save money on interest by paying off the loan quickly, but you might end up with a penalty fee instead.
Exactly. You have to weigh the potential savings against those possible costs and make the choice that works for your financial goals.
Well, this has been a great overview of the first steps in getting a used car loan. We've talked about interest rates, credit scores, down payments, processing fees,
Right.
all those fun things. But there's a lot more to explore in this deep dive.
Yeah, we're going to be getting into some really important stuff, like how to figure out what a used car is actually worth, how inspections work, and why depreciation matters. So stick around.
Welcome back to our deep dive into used car loans in India. Before the break, we were talking about credit scores, the different types of interest rates, and of course, all that fun paperwork. But now let's talk about the most important thing, the car itself.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just about getting a good loan, it's about getting a good car too. And one of the things this document really stresses is the loan-to-value ratio.
Loan to value, what's that all about?
Basically, it means making sure the loan you're getting actually matches what the used car is worth, like its actual market value.
Oh, okay. So we don't want to be in a situation where we owe more on the loan than the car is actually worth, right?
Exactly. That's called being upside down on your loan. And it can cause a lot of problems. Like, let's say you have an accident and the car gets totaled. If you're upside down on the loan, you can end up still owing money to the lender, even after the insurance pays out.
Yikes, that doesn't sound good. So how do we make sure that doesn't happen? How do we figure out what a used car is actually worth?
That's where professional car valuations come in. They're super helpful for this. It's kind of like getting an expert to look at a painting and tell you how much it's worth.
Oh, I see.
A professional will check out the car's condition, the mileage, any repairs or changes that have been made, and they'll compare it to other cars in the market to give you a good idea of its real value.
So it's like having someone on your side, making sure you're getting a fair deal and not overpaying.
Exactly. And speaking of making sure things are good, another important thing they talk about in this document is car inspections.
Car inspections.
Yeah. Some lenders might want you to get a professional inspection before they'll give you the loan, but it's actually a good idea for the buyer too, even if the lender doesn't require it.
I get why it's good for the lender, but how does it help the buyer? Don't they usually have to pay for the inspection?
Yeah, usually you do, but think of it like an investment. It's like getting a checkup before you go on a big trip.
Okay.
The inspection can find any hidden problems with the car, like mechanical issues or damage you might not have noticed just by taking it for a quick test drive.
So better safe than sorry.
Exactly. Spending a bit on an inspection could save you from bigger problems and more expensive repairs later.
That makes sense. And while we're talking about making smart decisions, remember depreciation. We talked about that a bit earlier. It's definitely something to consider when you're thinking about a used car, especially with the loan.
Right. We talked about how used cars lose value faster than new cars. But how does that affect this loan-to-value thing over time?
Well, as the car depreciates, it's worth less, right? So that could make the loan-to-value ratio go in the wrong direction.
Yeah, you got it. It means that even if you're paying off your loan, the car itself is becoming less valuable. If you decide to sell the car before the loan's completely paid off, you might find out you owe more than the car is worth.
Wow, that's something to think about. So we need to factor in depreciation when we're deciding how long we want the loan to be, and if we might want to sell the car before it's paid off.
Exactly. It's all about making smart choices based on how long you plan to keep the car, what your financial goals are. Now let's move on to something that's super important but often gets overlooked. In the excitement of getting a used car, the ownership transfer.
Ownership transfer, is that all the paperwork stuff?
Yeah, pretty much. But this document emphasizes how important it is to do it right.
Why is that? I mean, as long as I've paid for the car.
It's more than just paying. Transferring ownership the right way, legally and officially, protects you as the buyer and makes sure everything is transparent.
Okay.
It proves who owns the car, so there aren't any arguments or problems in the future.
So like the final step that says, okay, this car is officially yours.
Right. So make sure all the paperwork is filled out correctly and completely, including transferring the registration certificate to your name, getting new insurance, and updating the car's information with the RTO. And it's really important to check that the seller actually has the right to sell the car and that there aren't any outstanding loans or legal issues with it.
It sounds like a lot to remember, but it's all about making sure everything is done right so there aren't any surprises later.
Exactly. It might seem a bit complicated, but it's actually a pretty straightforward process. There are lots of resources online and legal professionals who can help you through it and make sure everything goes smoothly.
This has been really helpful. We've covered so much about how to figure out a used car's real value, understanding the risks, and even the legal side of things with ownership transfer.
It's all about giving you the tools to make good decisions and get behind the wheel of that perfect used car.
Okay, so we've talked about how to figure out if a used car is a good deal and what to look for in a loan, but where do we actually go to get these loans? This document mentions a bunch of different lenders.
Yeah, there are tons of options for used car loans in India these days. You've got your big banks like HDFC and ICICI, but also some you might not know as well, like AU Small Finance Bank.
Okay.
And then there are all these NBFCs, Piramal, Tata Capital, Mahindra Finance, Bajaj Finserv. It could be a bit overwhelming.
It's like walking into a huge used car lot, but for loans instead of cars. How do you even know where to start?
Well, that's why this document is all about comparing different lenders. Don't just go with the first one you see. Each one has its own rules, interest rates, fees, and even some might only finance certain types of cars.
So, like, we're shopping for a loan the same way we'd shop for the car. Makes sense. What are some of the things we should be comparing?
Well, interest rates are obviously a big one. Even a small difference in the interest rate can add up to a lot of money over time.
So lower is better, right?
Mm,
But I'm guessing it's not quite that simple.
of course not. You've also got to think about the loan tenure. How long you have to pay back the loan. A shorter tenure means you pay more each month, but you end up paying less interest overall.
Okay.
A longer tenure, those monthly payments are smaller, but you could end up paying more interest in the end.
It's like trying to find that balance between what you can afford each month and making sure you're not paying way too much interest.
Yeah, exactly.
And don't forget about those processing fees. We talked about those earlier. They can be different depending on the lender, so comparing those is a good idea too.
Oh, for sure. A lower processing fee means more cash in your pocket right away.
And of course, always read the fine print. Look for any hidden fees or charges, especially for paying off the loan early.
Definitely. You don't want any bad surprises later on, especially if your finances change and you decide to pay off the loan faster than you planned.
So it's all about being a smart borrower, doing your research, and finding the loan that actually works for you.
Absolutely. And remember, there are a ton of resources out there to help you, like websites that compare loans and financial advisors who can give you advice.
This whole deep dive has been super helpful. We've learned so much about used car loans in India, from understanding the different types of loans and lenders to figuring out how much a car is really worth and avoiding those hidden traps.
It's all about giving you the knowledge to make smart choices so you can get behind the wheel of your perfect used car without any stress.
So get out there, do your research, compare those offers, and drive away happy. This has been the deep dive. Thanks for joining us.